So I'm going to turn this over to David.
My name is David Ware with the Arkansas State Archives. I am your moderator for the day, adding a note of uncertainty to the proceedings. We are lucky to have the chance to visit virtually two of the archives that people point to as places they want to visit. Alaska on a cruise ship, Mississippi when we're trying to get out of Arkansas to see something cool. On our program today, we have David Pilcher from Mississippi Department of Archives and History. I think I have that right, yes. And Karen Gray, State Archivist of Alaska. The format is that we will hear from David and then hear from Karen. And at the end of the program, there will be time to ask questions. If you have questions, please put them into the chat, and Lisa and I will keep track of them, and we'll get to as many of them as we have time for at the end of the program. So, at any rate, I think it's time for me to get out of the way and get on to the stars of the show. To you, David.
Thank you. Okay, I have my buttons now. Good afternoon. I'm Dave Pilcher from the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. I'm director of the Archives and Records Services Division. And we really appreciate being invited to be a part of this. So thank you. And just so you know, for question time, I also have another staff member with me, Julie Dees, the director of our electronic archives section, is here in the office as well. And I'm going to give you an overview of the department, and then we can address any specifics that you have in questions. But right now, just some facts about the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. The department was created in 1902. We have been independent since creation, never a part of another agency. They're governed by a 9-member self-appointing board of trustees serving 6-year terms. Leadership has been pretty stable as we are on director number 7 in 122 years. We are a comprehensive state historical agency. At the beginning of fiscal year 2025, in July, we had 155 total staff members. The image you see here is of the archival reading room in our library. As I mentioned, we're a comprehensive state historical agency. Our current director, Katie Blunt, has been in the position since 2015 and oversees 5 divisions: administration, archives and record services, historic preservation, museums, and programs and communication. I'm primarily going to be talking about the Archives and Record Services division today, but I'll say a few words about the other divisions to give you an idea of how we're structured and what all we cover. The administration division consists of the administrative officers for the department, along with the development office, finance office, human resources, and information systems. The division is housed in the William F. Winter Archives and History Building in downtown Jackson. The Historic Preservation Division provides technical assistance and grants for preservation projects. They also maintain an extensive database of the state's archaeological sites and historic resources. They administer the Mississippi Landmark Program and the National Historic Preservation Act Section 106 review process. They also manage rehabilitation tax credit programs, the State Historical Marker Program, Abandoned Cemeteries Program, and National Register of Historic Places nominations. The division is located in the Charlotte Capers building, pictured here, about 3 doors south of where we are here in the Winter building. The Capers building was home to the archives from 1971 to 2003 when we opened the Winter building. The museum division operates what we call the 2 Mississippi museums, the Museum of Mississippi History and the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, pictured here. if you want to come see them, and I recommend that you do, contact me first. I have free passes. The two museums adjoin and are located next door to the Winter Building on its north side. The division also administers several other museums and sites in Jackson and around the state, including the Eudora Welty House and Garden, the Manship House Museum, the Old Capitol Museum, and the Mississippi Governor's Mansion, all in Jackson, along with the Grand Village of the Natchez Indians in Natchez, Historic Jefferson College in Washington near Natchez, Winterville Mounds in the Mississippi Delta near Greenville, among others. And pictured here are the Eudora Welty House and Garden up in the upper left, Historic Jefferson College in the upper right, and down at the bottom, the Winterville Mounds. Museum Division also has two major projects currently in the design phase, a visitor center that will be located adjacent to the Vicksburg National Military Park, depicted at the top, and the Natchez Tribal Cultural Center. The Archives and Record Services Division is heavily engaged in helping locate and acquire documents and other materials for future display. The Programs and Communication Division is the department's newest, having been created in 2017. The division is located in the Old Capitol Building, shown there at the top right, and administers programming, public relations, marketing, and social media for the department. It also works with educators through workshops and other programs to inform them of historical resources available in the archives and museums. The bottom photo is of the Mississippi Makers Fest, an annual festival sponsored by MDAH and held on the green space in front of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum. And now for the division we're really here to talk about, the Archives and Records Services Division. First, a few facts. The first department director inherited crates containing the unorganized state archives upon creation of the department in 1902 and spent 35 years bringing order to those materials and also acquiring additional records and collections. Collection materials date back to the French, English, and Spanish provincial periods prior to the formation of the Mississippi Territory in 1798. The department became the official records management agency for state government with the adoption of the Archives and Records Management Law in 1981. We aggressively collect private materials. The division currently has 38 full-time staff members, 3 vacant full-time positions, 5 part-time contractual staff, and 6 to 8 volunteers on average. We also have seasonal interns, as the department has a very active internship program across all the divisions. The FY 2025 budget for the Archives and Records Services Division alone is roughly $2.83 million. The bottom image is a view along the central reference desk looking into our library's public reading room. And of course, that's the William F. Winter Archives and History Building at the top. The Archives and Records Services Division consists of 5 sections: government records, manuscripts and image collections, electronic archives, library services, and archival reformatting. The photo here is of an aisle in one of the 2 underground archival stacks floors in the Winter Building. The government records section includes staff that work in 3 areas: state government archives, state government records management, and local government records management. State government archive staff are located in the Winter Building and work to accession, process, preserve, catalog, and provide access to paper-based archival records received from state government agencies and officials. The staff includes a section head, 5 full-time state government records management staff, 4 full-time local government records management staff, 4 full-time government archive staff. The images are the first page of the 1817 Mississippi Constitution and blueprints of the Jackson Library where the Tougaloo 9 protest occurred in 1961. The top photo is actually of two of our summer interns, excuse me, which explains why they're so young and eager looking, and they know they can go back to school and escape the ever-present mountain of records to process. Government records management staff, state government records management staff, work out of two locations, the former Gulf Mobile and Ohio Railroad Depot building, the red brick building pictured here, located behind the Charlotte Capers building, and the State Record Center, located behind and down the hill from the depot, and pictured here with exterior and interior shots. The staff worked with the State Records Committee, agencies, and officials to produce records retention schedules for government. Staff have been working to streamline our schedules by replacing agency-specific schedules with general schedules that apply to all agencies, and have actually eliminated over 1,000 schedules in the last 3 years alone. State staff also operate the State Record Center for the temporary storage of non-permanent state government records, and they conduct a backup tape rotation for state agencies. The Local Government Records Office, or LGRO, staff are also housed in the former GM&O Depot, and of course, they also spend a lot of their time traveling the state. The LGRO was created by legislation in 1996, and the program is partially funded by a document filing fee, and county boards of supervisors must opt in to participate. I have a map here that shows the participation. The blue counties are the counties that are participating. The white are those that are not. So at the time I sent these slides in 2 weeks ago, there were 79 out of 82 counties participating. We've been stuck on 79 for the last year or two, but just since I sent the slides, we have had one of these counties decide to opt into the program. LaFleur County in the on the edge of the Mississippi Delta, they have decided to opt in. So now we're up to 80 out of 82 counties, and we're happy about that. Also, there's a picture of LGRO staff doing disaster recovery, and a typical Mississippi courthouse. That's the courthouse in Union County in New Albany. The manuscripts and image collection section acquires, takes care of, and provides access to manuscript and photograph collections. We collect in accordance with our collection development policy. Most private materials are acquired through donation. However, we do have some funds designated for purchasing materials, primarily due to gifts and bequeathments of generous archives patrons who specify that the funds be used for that purpose. The staff includes a section head, 2 full-time manuscript staff, 2 full-time image collection staff, 2 part-time contractual staff, and we have 1 vacant full-time manuscript staff position. And just so you don't think it's all glamorous, I have included an image of a collection pickup in a barn outside of Laurel, Mississippi. I don't know if you can see it, but right in the lower left, there's a rather large rat's nest. The electronic archives section. Electronic archives section staff accession, process, preserve, catalog, and provide access to born digital records and resources received by MDAH, as well as digital images produced by our archival reformatting section of materials from our holdings. Our digital repository currently contains approximately 134.5 terabytes, and the staff includes a section head, 2 full-time digital archivists, 1 full-time systems administrator, and we have 1 vacant full-time systems specialist position. Please check out our digital archives if you get a chance. There's a few screen grabs here. Also the catalog, where you also have access to materials that have been digitized, and anything that's in electronic form that is available on the internet is accessible through the catalog. Also, there's a picture in the upper right that is a picture of our FRED, our Forensic Recovery of Evidence device, pictured in the electronic archives processing room. The library services section is comprised of 2 units. Reference services staff operate the archives library, handle requests from offsite researchers, and manage the order and use permissions process. Published information staff catalog and provide access to the published information collection, including books, serials, maps, state documents, and broadsides. The staff includes a section head, 6 full-time reference staff, 3 full-time published information collection and cataloging staff, and 2 part-time contractual reference staff. The image of the reference services office suite includes a few vintage microfilm and fiche readers that we have hung on to. Might look familiar to you. One is actually a 1940s era Recordac microfilm reader. The archival reformatting section. The section staff digitize resources from our holdings selected by an in-house reformatting committee for addition to the digital archives. They conduct quality control inspection and preliminary metadata work prior to transfer to electronic archives. That says election archives. That's electronic archives. And they accession, process, preserve, catalog, and provide access to MDAH audiovisual collections, and digitize resources to fulfill public orders for digital images and digitized audio and video. The section staff includes a section head, 1 full-time digital imaging specialist, 2 full-time audiovisual collection staff, 2 part-time contractual staff, and 1 vacant full-time digital imaging specialist position. The images here include one of a Bookeye scanner in the digitization studio, a Filmic EZ16 film scanner in the AV studio, and also some of the U-matic tapes from our WLBT news film collection stored in the stacks while they await digitization. If you wonder why AV is part of the archival reformatting section, it's really because the section head was formerly our AV curator, and when a couple of other sections were split up, it just kind of evolved that way. So it works for us. That's all the sections. I did want to mention something that has turned out to be really beneficial for us. We're now offering 3 competitive fellowships annually, and the stipend is now set at $5,000 for each. The Medgar and Murray Evers Research Fellowship, the Nora Welty Research Fellowship, and the newest, the Religion and Mississippi History Fellowship, which is actually funded by a Lilly Endowment grant that we have a project going for. And we also have a paid internship program that has turned out to be a great way for students to get their foot in the door if they are interested in a career in an archival institution, whether here or somewhere else. So that is a quick look at our institution, and we'll be glad to take any questions at the end. So thank you.
David, thank you very much. This makes me want more and more than before to come over and pay you guys a visit if they ever let me out of here alive. Our second presenter is Karen Gray from the Alaska State Archives. Let me see. Let me be quiet and let Karen take the floor.
Okay, and thank you. I'm Karen Gray, Alaska State Archives, and good morning. Welcome from one of the newest states and one of the newer state archives. So hold on here. I'm waiting for controls and then we'll advance the slides.
You should have control, Karen.
Okay, I'm waiting for it to show up. There we go. I think I see it now. Okay. All right, so originally we were established in the Department of Administration in 1970, and the State Archives opened its first facility in 1975 with the dedication address delivered by then Archivist of the United States, Dr. James Rhodes. In 1987, the archives transferred to the Division of Libraries, and today it resides in the Division of Libraries, Archives, and Museums within the Department of Education and Early Development. We are one of the few government archives that falls under a Department of Education, which is underneath a Board of Education and Early Development. The state archives consist of three primary units: the archives, the records management division, and the imaging and microfilm service. The records management program existed before the archives, starting in the territorial period in 1957. At that time, it was part of the Territorial Department of Finance, and driven by the anticipation of statehood, a comprehensive record group and series procedures were created and distributed to territorial agencies in 1958, and the program continued into statehood after 1959 within the Department of Administration. Here's an overall budget for our fiscal year of 2025, and you can see the majority of funds are dedicated to staffing. Another large chunk goes back to interagency chargebacks, such as IT or human resources services, and our funding is a mixture of general funds, interagency receipts, and federal receipt authority. Shortly after the first archives building opened in 1975, the archives had up to 17 staff members, but now we function with 9 full-time positions. After dedicated funding for staff and chargebacks is subtracted, there's just a little left for supplies or other activities. And when we do order supplies, we need to budget for shipping, which can sometimes cost just as much as the supplies themselves, since everything is either flown into town or barged in. We also have a SHRAB board, and all the board members are appointed by the governor, but the SHRAB is currently inactive due to staffing and funding issues. So as mentioned before, our records management existed before the state archives did, starting in 1957. The records management program has no authority over local government, the legislature, or the judiciary branches, and with only 16 executive branch agencies, records analysts can concentrate primarily on state agency needs. We currently have 2 records analyst positions, but one is vacant, and they work on retention schedules, policies, procedures, standards, email management. They provide training, and they run a disaster recovery microfilm program, which is like running a records center for local government within our vault, but only for microfilm holdings. If local government or other branches request training or consultations, we do provide that, but again, we have no authority over them. Since the mid-1990s, we no longer run a records center, but there are 2 contracted records centers in our state, in Juneau and Anchorage, and the state records manager works with a contract officer out of Department of Administration to oversee these contracts, which have about 130,000 cubic feet of non-current state records. The records analysts also oversee additional contracts for shredding and reformatting services both in and outside the state. And the records management program oversees our imaging and microfilm service unit. So here on the bottom left is our new building, and I keep saying our new building, but it opened in 2016, so it's not quite as new as I think it is. Alaska is fairly large, and there are very few roads in our state. And Juneau is in the southeastern panhandle, and we're only about 30 miles or so from the Canadian border, but you can't get there or anywhere else from Juneau without taking a plane or a ferry to get out of town. We're also surrounded by an ice field, making it a little more difficult to get to a road system. And we are also in the middle of the largest temperate rainforest in the world, so moisture is a constant issue. All of this is to say that very few patrons travel to our town to do research, so we provide a lot of electronic services to citizens across the state, and even that can be difficult, particularly to regions with poor broadband or satellite connectivity issues. This new facility, the Father Andrew P. Kashaveroff Building, houses the majority of our Division of Libraries, Archives, and Museums. And the site is on the location of the previous State Museum, which, like the original State Archives building, had lots of leaks and lack of collection spaces by the time this facility was approved and built. In this facility, the State Museum is located on the first floor, and the State Library and State Archives are on the second floor. So, what do we have? Collections include executive and judicial records for the district, territory, and state periods, and legislative records from the territorial and state periods. Although we have more cubic feet of records from statehood, the district and territorial periods span a longer time frame. There are 75 years of pre-statehood materials and only 65 years of statehood records. We do not have Russian American records, but are allowed to collect them by regulation. And in reality, we have less than a handful of Russian American records. And some of those items came to us from private collections or were part of the transfer from Russian America to the United States that somehow stayed in Alaska. It's often more helpful to talk about what we don't have than what we do. So we do not have any collections from the Department of Alaska, which was run by the Army, the Treasury, and the Navy. And we do not collect personal papers or publications. That is not to say that there are none in the collections, but what we have were created by people who were directly involved with crafting Alaska's government, either in the territorial period or during the transition to statehood. When the State Archives was authorized in 1970, we received government records transfers from the Alaska Historical Library, which was created by Congress in 1900. At that time, the Secretary of the District of Alaska instructed the governor to collect laws, papers, and periodicals of the district, ensuring that early government records were preserved. In the 1970s, the state legislature also mandated that the University of Alaska Fairbanks transfer records they housed from the first state governor to our agency, but these came to us in the form of microfilm as opposed to the actual textual records. And the bulk of the district and territorial records came to us from the National Archives in the 1980s, along with an additional accrual of 3,000 cubic feet in 2015. The agreements we have in place with NARA allow us to have territorial agency and court records, but do not allow us to have maritime records. Let's see here. Our holdings from 1884 on include over 26,000 cubic feet of analog records, 700 cubic feet of microfilm, 49 terabytes of digital records, thousands of hours of recorded audio and video, and lots of wonderful defunct formats such as IBM punch cards, reel-to-reel tapes, and every visual format you can think of from the governor's press office. We have evidence hidden in our court records and artifacts, building plaques, and building models. Notable holdings include collections related to our Constitutional Convention, including all of the minutes, committee papers, and all 75 days of the convention audio recordings, the Exxon Valdez oil spill litigation, district, territorial, and state governors' papers, boards of fish and game records, and the territorial court records, which also include vital records and recorded information and land records. One noteworthy criminal case file from 1909 is for a gentleman named Robert Stroud, who committed his first murder downtown here in Juneau. And some of you may know Mr. Stroud better as the Birdman of Alcatraz. Let's see, we've got next here. Oops, sorry, let me get back to that. So here's our reference research room, and it's got plenty of space for anyone who's willing to fly into town. Since it's so difficult to get to Juneau, we have very few in-person reference requests. We average 436 requests per year with only 1 to 3 people in person per month. Since most of our requests arrive via email or phone, we service almost every request or provide a list of researchers for hire who do in-depth research for those who cannot make it here. Right now, our biggest subjects requested include fish and game records, particularly from the scientific community or those involved in fisheries quota litigation. And we have seen an increase in genealogy requests over the past decade, particularly in the summer from cruise ship passengers who stop in looking for long-lost relatives who pass through the territory. Other records requested are those that show indirect impacts on climate change, such as photos of glaciers that scientists use to show how they recede over the decades. And hold on. As I'm trying to get this to move forward, just a moment. There we go. Okay. And then our processing area is in the middle of our staff cubicles. And as you can see, we are packed. We no longer have a processing archivist position, so processing has unfortunately become a special project. Accessions of analog materials have gone way down since the pandemic. And when we first moved into this facility, we moved out of an old archives building as well as additional rented offsite storage spaces. What we had not anticipated was a large transfer from NARA in 2015 and another from the Department of Law in 2016 for the Exxon Valdez oil spill litigation. So both of these accessions used over 15 years worth of accrual space in our vault. Pre-pandemic, accruals averaged around 600 cubic feet per year, and we hit an all-time low 2 fiscal years ago when we brought in only 79 cubic feet of materials. Last fiscal year brought in 192 cubic feet, so we have not regained those pre-pandemic transfer levels yet of analog records. And here is our vault, which we share with the state library. There are 4 bays, of which we use 3, and we are pretty much full. More of our vault, at the head of each bay, we have map and flat storage collections. And in one drawer, which you can see in the lower left, is one of our earliest records, a Russian-American deed transfer of land to the United States. Many of our map drawers also house framed materials, as storage was not planned for those types of items when we moved in. We were able to add a small bit of picture racking after we moved in, and in the picture on the left, you can see the first item is a 9-foot framed map, which is covered up to minimize its light exposure. And it is of the settlement of New Archangel, or Sitka, which is one of our earliest records. It shows the properties transferred from the Russian-American company to the United States upon purchase. And each of the buildings on the key on the map is published in the House Executive Document number 125 from the 40th Congress in 1868, just shortly after purchase. Our vault also has 4 freezer units, which are all kept at different temperatures for different formats. And unfortunately, the vault for our nitrate film continually failed. It is currently working, but we're keeping it off just because we continue to anticipate failures to that freezer. And as I've mentioned several times now, we have received large accruals from the National Archives, which make up the core of our district and territorial holdings. As you can see on the left, we have not reboxed the records we have received from the National Archives. They have the original labels, record groups, and series structures, and those have remained intact, particularly from the last transfer we received. The initial transfer of district and territorial papers occurred in the 1980s. And the second transfer again occurred in 2015 when they closed the Anchorage National Archives branch. That brought in 6,000 containers, or 3,000 cubic feet at the time. Luckily, the vault portion of this building was already built, so they could come straight in. In 2020, when we were told that the Seattle National Archives branch was going to close, I was scared that we would receive even more records. So fortunately, they have not closed yet, and NARA only identified about 50 cubic feet of materials they would transfer if they did indeed close those particular things, building. And right now we do have two archival assistants working on the long-term project to create case indexes for these National Archives court records. And for several months period this summer, it was not uncommon for one of our assistants to find live or used shell casings in the criminal records as part of the evidence that had been retained. And she even found encapsulated nitrate films. So that made for kind of an exciting day this summer. Hold on. I'm trying to move the slides again. And I've lost my arrows, so hold on. There we go. Thank you. We do have a conservation lab, but we don't have a conservator. So after you pass the dinosaur on the right, you come to our paper lab, and you can often find another archival assistant building boxes for ledgers, bound volumes, and other non-textual artifacts that we have. And I was very excited this summer because she built a box for our Constitution, which has been housed in an oversized folder for all of its life. I was dreading the day if we ever had an earthquake or another type of disaster, and if we had time to run into the vault to grab our Constitution, that we would be dragging it outside in the rain and the snow. So I do feel a sense of relief that it has a better housing unit now for when we take it outside. And we have an imaging lab. It's a really nice, huge space with reformatting equipment, an additional camera room for our one remaining MRD camera, 2 fully stocked dark rooms, which we rarely use anymore, and the main room where we house projects waiting to be reformatted along with the equipment to do so, including our newest scanner, which is a VersaScan. We also have 3 Meckles, an SMA, 2 Freds, and some high-speed paper scanners. And then there's also a room off of this utilized by the State Library to reformat audio and video holdings, which they have an awful lot of. So when they designed this facility, they did not give us dedicated exhibit space. What we can utilize are unsecured cases on our second floor mezzanine. And so we create and display banners or replicas of materials. We do have 2 small cases that we purchased from Gaylord, but shipping them up here, of course, costs just as much as purchasing the cases themselves. So that concludes our physical spaces, and now we'll talk about our digital spaces. And here is our current website, but we are in the process of migrating it right now. And here is a preview of our new website. It will be utilizing an Umbraco content management system, and we were just given a demonstration this week, so hopefully we will have that up and running in the next few months. For our electronic records, we have 49 terabytes of information residing primarily in 2 places, Preservica and on eSeries NetApps, when we do have a server room here within our building. We procured Preservica in 2019 and have been slowly migrating digital records into it ever since. And since 2019, state agencies are charged back for all digital storage, regardless of where it is stored, to cover all the cost of Preservica. Of the 49 terabytes, only 18 are housed in Preservica and the rest are on the NetApps. The assets we migrated over are primarily born digital, but also include some of the digitized audio that is heavily accessed. And of those 18 terabytes, we have over 240 digital formats. Let's see here. And before we acquired Preservica, we had a few other places where you could find digital content, all with third parties or on social media. So that again, we had the E-Series. We utilized the Alaska's Digital Archives, which is a content DM system housing materials from 17 repositories around the state. We have 30 terabytes of records with Family Search, although not all of those are indexed and available yet. Ancestry has over 17,000 of our probate records. Hoona Heritage Foundation digitizes records that relate to the village of Hoona, and they utilize the Makuto system. And now we do have Preservica, and that is where we are hoping to put everything else. So our current projects, here's a listing of all of our current projects. As I previously mentioned, we're in the midst of a website migration. And last year, we migrated our catalog system from Monisys to Archivera. So we are now planning at least a year-long project to clean up that data and add more information to the catalog system. And along with the catalog cleanup, we will be writing scopes and contents, as we are missing quite a few of them. Of the 278 record groups we have, less than a quarter have scopes. And of the 1,148 series we have, less than half of those have scopes. We're currently searching for a records management software solution, but we've pretty much settled on Axiom by Apex. And we're looking into that. And then, of course, we're digitizing. We have 2 digitization projects. The Exxon Valdez is for analog space reduction, but the digitization we do for the boards of Fish and Game are primarily for access. As I did mention, we just migrated to Archivera, so we're really excited about that. It's been live for about 2 months now, and so we're still training up our staff and figuring out the best way to train patrons on how to use this system. And finally, we, like all of you, I am sure, have a few challenges. Budget, it's always a challenge. Space is truly a challenge, both digital and physical. And staffing is indeed a challenge. So we have lost 5 positions since 2015 across all of our units. But I think what our bigger problem is right now for the positions we have left is actually attraction and retention. So trying to get somebody to move to Juneau is a little difficult. The salaries we offer look great on paper, but when you look at our housing fees and cost of living, as well as the cost to actually move here, that has actually dissuaded candidates from taking positions. So I think that is what all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Karen, and thank you, David. We are now into the question and answer session, and I have a few questions here. First off, for David, conservation treatment work, do you outsource that?
We do some outsourcing actually. We have a lot of people on staff, on our archival staff, who have great skills with conservation work, but we do not have a full-time conservator. The museum division actually has one. And occasionally we'll run into something where it's beyond our capabilities, and that happened recently. Back in the spring of 2023, a historic home in Natchez called Hope Farm burned, and a map was pulled out of there by the Historic Natchez Foundation, and they kind of arranged for the family to donate it to us, and it's a rare map. It's a very large and fragile map. It's about 6 feet by 5 feet, and it's the 1839 La Tourette map of Mississippi with parts of adjoining states, and it the condition just really required that we do something about it. And it took us a while to find a conservator that would work on something that large and in the condition it was, but we eventually found one in Indianapolis. We took the map up there in July because it was cheaper for us to actually drive it up there ourselves than it was to use an art shipper. And we just got it back this week. I was in Indianapolis Monday and Tuesday, and we drove her home. So it's back here, and we feel pretty good about the experience.
Just a question with the transport of the map. What sort of protective packaging did you have to come up with to make the transfer safe?
When we transferred it up there, we came up with our own system. We used some large, I think 4-foot sheets of archival foam that had been sitting in our stacks for years, just waiting for this purpose. And we kind of came up with a system of foam and visqueen, and we kind of rolled it into really what looked like a large burrito. And we took some of the seats out of the van, and we just were very careful. And then when the conservator completed the work, he actually purchased a large, I forget the diameter of the acid-free tube that he purchased, and was able to get it into that. It's actually still in that. We're not going to open it until we're going to meet with the conservator from the museum and a few other people next week to kind of plan our next move with how we display it. So
yeah. Okay. A question about your organizational structure. Now, does your division have a deputy director?
No, we're the only division that in the department that does not have a deputy director, and it's really by choice. We have a very deep and experienced staff. We have section heads that just are, just great, and so I kind of feel like I have 5 deputy directors, and I think that'll probably change in the future. But for now, this is how it is.
Yeah. Okay. Generally, your organizational structure works well. You have good lines of communication.
I do. I feel in our division, it's changed over the years a number of times, and I think some of the moves we've made in the last, I guess, 5 years, where we kind of created the library services umbrella for reference and published information. I think that has turned out to be a good move, and department wide, I think it's in a pretty good place now as well.
Sounds good. Well, Karen, question for you about migrations, moving spaces. What have you learned from moving facilities? He says with a twinkle in his eye, other than be out of town that year.
This was actually my second state archives move. The first one I participated in was with the Arizona State Archives. And there we had 2 years of planning, which was fantastic. And I was in charge of moving the Records Center out of 3 rented facilities and into the new State Archives building. Here, I came back to the state after they had already made all the plans. So yes, being out of town during those planning is great. But then living with what had been decided before we came on, into the facility was an issue. So for instance, wonderful imaging lab. The camera room was originally designed to house a Houston Fearless deep tank processor. But they went ahead and surplused that unit 2 years before moving into the building and didn't redesign the space. So it has wonderful snorkels and an eye wash station, lots of water available, but no deep tank, processor. And we now have 2 dark rooms that are fantastic, chemical resistant countertops. Each has an eye wash station. We use them once a month, and we're about to end that here in December. So, if they had talked to the architects as they were closing down these programs, that would have been fantastic. Another thing I will say is that when you do plan your new spaces, now having worked with 2 different archives, if you build it, they will come. In Arizona, they came quickly, and here they came, but in huge, huge accruals. So double your space if you, for your planned accruals and growth. It's amazing how quickly you can fill up space once you move out of a building that has issues, such as leaks.
I understand. One thing that strikes me looking at the map and then speaking with at the conference, and also having friends who've lived in Alaska over the years, all of us face climate challenges of one sort or another. It strikes me you have the potential for the extreme of most climate complications. Would you like to talk about how you mitigate these?
Sure. So, I've talked about this facility in Juneau, but we do have 2 long-term loans out too. And one of those involves over 1,000 recorder volumes that are in Nome, Alaska. And they're in a museum there. They're on loan to the city of Nome. But Nome gets hit by typhoons. And the last one we were really worried about, Typhoon Merbok in 2022, really eroded a lot of the town. And although it didn't damage the facility, apparently they could see water coming up the road that could have eventually hit that facility. So we do have to start thinking about long term if we're going to leave those records in Nome or not. Here in Juneau, we're lucky that we're not in a tsunami zone. We're protected by islands in front of us, but we do have earthquakes. So we are really actively rehousing all of our bound, volumes and ledgers. Because if they do, it's great that this new facility has compact shelving, so the bulk of the records won't fall when we do have earthquakes. But for those on the end caps, we do want them housed so that they can take a little less damage if they do shake off. So we do think about all of these things because, yes, with collections in different parts of the state, there are different issues to deal with, especially as climate change is really starting to hit us up.
Yeah. Well, one final question. And I asked you this in the private comments, but I think others might find it interesting too. You mentioned encapsulated nitrate negatives. Past the obvious one of what were they thinking? What do you do with them? Sell them for fire starter?
Yes. So as our assistant was going through, and it was interesting. She truly was finding bullets and bullet casings at least once a week. And I told her we were going to make her start writing a blog about these National Archives, criminal case files. And we were going to call it the Bulletin. The Bulletin this week. And this case file is this. But then she came to me with a totally encapsulated folder that had at least 7 or 8 negatives in it that were truly corroding. And she said, I don't know what this is. And I said, I know exactly what that is. let's put it down. So it was indeed encapsulated nitrate film. We have moved it on into our freezer space with other nitrate film we have. We're not going to maintain it, but it was an interesting case file. That it was one of the first case files in Anchorage, and I believe it was from the early 1920s, where they actually fingerprinted everybody on the jury because they wanted to show how to do fingerprint analysis. And we're assuming some of these negatives include pictures of jurors, not the plaintiffs or the anybody else involved, but everything seemed to revolve around the juror and how they were going to start showing fingerprint analysis for this criminal case.
Cool. Were you able to scan them through the encapsulation layers?
We didn't. We have taken many photos of them, but we have not scanned them.
Don't want to have anything blow up in that nice, expensive new scanner.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, thank you for satisfying my curiosity at any rate. We haven't found anything quite that interesting yet, but we can ship you some extra nitrate if you want to make a batch sale of it.
We have more.
As do we. Well, David and Karen, thank you very much. And now I'm going to get out of the way and hand you back to Lisa, who has closing remarks and reminders for upcoming webinars.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David and Karen, for great presentations. Now I think we all want to come and visit you. So maybe you'll get some more visitors. So we hope you enjoyed this webinar, and our education committee works very hard to put together a series of webinars throughout the year. So we don't have our schedule yet for 2025, but watch for us as we decide what kind of interesting things we'll be bringing to you this next year. However, CIRI does have another webinar here in November, and they're going to be looking at the Backer Grant and some of the implications of that. So tune in for that. As always, you can contact us many ways through CoSA, and I hope you'll use as many that are appropriate for you. We could do very little of our work if we did not have funding from our funders, IMLS and the Mellon Foundation. And of course, our sponsors are an integral part of everything we do. So if you have contact with our sponsors, we encourage you to let them know that we appreciate their support of CoSA. So with that, we thank you guys for joining us today. There is a short evaluation, and please, we really do ask you to fill it out if you can, because it really helps our education committee figure out what you liked, what you didn't like, suggestions for future programs, what would you like to see more of, and how else you might like to see things involved with CoSA. So thank you all for joining us today, and I hope we'll see you at the next CoSA webinar. Take care, everyone.